Hi, my name is Karrar and I am here to speak about the actions that I would demand of the United Nations Secretary General and why I seek them. This is a part of my IE MBA admission essays. So let's present my case to him. Mr. Secretary, the first thing that I want to talk about is the war in Syria and Yemen. Syria's brutal conflict, now in its fifth year, has touched off one of the greatest humanitarian crises I have ever witnessed. The UN estimates more than 250,000 dead people so far, many of whom are believed to be civilians. 500,000 people currently living under siege are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. Recently, international media reported that aid received from a UN agency in a starved Syrian town was majorly consumed and stored for themselves by the occupying militants, and only a small portion of the same was sold to the civilians at very expensive rates. Similarly, in Yemen war, the casualties have already exceeded 8,000 people. Millions face food and water shortages. A more disturbing fact is that an overwhelming majority of the deaths and injuries in Yemen war are believed to be civilian in nature. Surely, protection of civilians from harm must be a priority, even during the armed conflicts. From this reflection emerged the Geneva Conventions of 1949, soon after the adoption of Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN. So, Mr. Secretary, I demand of your good self to press the world powers to establish and declare no war zones in certain suitable areas of both Syria and Yemen. Of course, after making them completely safe and free of all warring parties. These safe zones can be used to provide temporary shelter, food, and medical supplies to all the civilians who are either currently dying in the conflict or undertaking dangerous journeys towards Europe. The UN peacekeeping missions assisted by the world powers should have the joint responsibility to protect these safe zones from every kind of aggression and threat. I demand these urgent steps to prevent further loss of civilian lives in Syria, Yemen, and at other places of armed conflict. Mr. Secretary, the next thing that I want to talk about is the veto power and the UNSC reforms. By wielding their veto power, the P5 can prevent the adoption of any Security Council resolution not to their liking. As a result, the Security Council is prevented from taking action on pressing international issues. As your good self knows, amendments to the present charter can only come into force if adopted by 2/3 of the members of General Assembly. But that must also include the consent of P5, which itself shows how unrepresentative the Security Council could be of the majority opinion. So I demand to fast-track the UNSC reforms process. I in fact urge complete restructuring of the Security Council body. The new Security Council should be representative of all the regions of the world. Each region in terms of its population, geographical location, and resources contribution to the UN should be able to elect its own representatives to the Security Council. Any Security Council resolution should then be passed by the majority vote, and the veto power should be completely abolished. This is how I believe the UNSC can serve the common interests of the world. Mr. Secretary, the last thing that I want to talk about is climate change. The limitation of global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius under the Paris Agreement is a much awaited step in the right direction. But, Mr. Secretary, I'm afraid that this is not enough now. Because we are talking about the survival of our planet and the whole of humanity. So, I urge your good office to encourage the 188 signatories of the Paris Agreement to submit aggressive proposals about not only curtailing but also reversing the process of global warming. These could be plans for ambitious reforestation, incentives for mass development and promotion of green energy sources. These plans should also be linked to the current level of industrialization and carbon emissions of each country. Also, there could be a comprehensive ban on highly harmful contributors such as the polythene bags, the halons, and etc. I thank you for your time, Mr. Secretary. Goodbye.